Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Kramer with MRC-TV. Today we have Erich Pratt, Senior Vice President for Gun Owners of America, joining us to debrief President Biden's speech and where he sees the debate on gun control going. Erich, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
In the last 10 days, we have seen 2 mass shootings conducted by young men, and we're experiencing an overall increase of violence. I wanted to ask you if you watched President Biden's speech after the Texas school shooting, and if you think that he correctly diagnosed our society's underlying problem, or if he's missing something.
No, he is missing so much, and we could probably spend a couple of hours talking about all the lies and misstatements that he made. But I suppose at its core, he thinks that the way we're going to stop these things, these types of shootings, is by passing more laws, by passing gun control laws. And that just simply doesn't work. I mean, he said, well, we can't prevent every tragedy, but, well, no, gun control doesn't prevent any tragedy. I mean, look at Chicago. Over the just this month, there's been more than 40 people shot and killed in that city. Baltimore, over the last 30 days, 20 people have been shot and killed. Well, guess what? Both of those cities have red flag laws, universal background checks. They have so-called assault weapon bans, really bans on semi-automatic firearms, on good self-defense weapons like AR-15s. They have banned these things, and yet they're still having incredible amounts of violence. So, in other words, the point is trying to ban certain objects is never going to keep evil, determined people from getting them. In fact, it all the more makes it more dangerous for the good people, because then it's much harder for them to protect themselves.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. There's an increase of violence, particularly, not necessarily an increase of guns. I think a fair question to ask is, why do these shootings happen in America now when they didn't happen in the past, and with such frequency compared to other countries who I would argue probably have a similar cultural decline? So exactly what do you think is particularly rotten about our polity that's causing so many young men to do this?
Well, you raise a whole host of excellent points. First of all, this does happen more frequently today than in the past. And isn't it interesting that in the past, go back to the 50s and 60s, we had fewer gun control laws, right? And yet kids weren't taking guns to school to shoot it up. Actually, kids did take guns to school for target practice after school, or for hunting after school, but they weren't killing people. So it's not the laws that have changed. Well, actually, we have more laws, more restrictions today, and yet people are getting around those restrictions. And one has to ask, why is there this drive for people to shoot up and kill a bunch of people and then, result in suicide? And I think a lot of the answers to those questions are going to have nothing to do with laws. It has to do with morality. It has to do with your view of God. It has to do with your view of life. And our society has devalued life. So those are much bigger questions than just simply tacking on a law, which, as we were just talking about, that they're not working in Chicago or Baltimore. The other thing you brought up was comparing to other countries. And this was something that Joe Biden had touched on, that, these things happen here and they're not happening anywhere else, when in fact they actually do happen all around the world. It's just that our media here doesn't report on them. Out of the worst 25 mass shootings in the world, in other words, the highest death counts, 23 of them occurred outside of the country, and yet most of them are ones that people never heard about here. A couple of them people might have heard about, the Mumbai hotel shootings and a couple others, but most of them just the media simply didn't cover. When you look at the 100 countries, there was a study done of 100 countries that have had mass shootings. The United States was in the lower half in terms of per capita. Now, the left likes to say, oh, but we have so many more in this country. Well, We have a lot more of everything because we have a lot of people. We have more cars, so we have more car accidents. We have more hands and feet, so more people strangle each other and beat each other to death. We have more bathtubs, so more people slip and fall and die in bathtubs. More bike deaths, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. More people, more total deaths. But when you look at per capita, in other words, the rate per 100,000, we are in the bottom half worldwide. And all those countries that have a higher per capita rate, like France and Norway and Switzerland and other countries, many of those, all those countries have stricter gun control than we do. So, yeah, it's a total farce what the president has tried to push, saying that we're more dangerous here, and he just completely ignores the mass shootings that are occurring in other countries.
Yeah, I mean, you're hearing it constantly. The left thinks that it's lax gun laws. I personally think we need to look at treating the damaged person before they get to the point of using a weapon to commit acts of violence. Do you think stricter regulation would have stopped this massacre? People are saying that this kid got this gun legally. If he wasn't able to get that, but maybe this wouldn't have happened. I seem to think that if you're already that violent and wanting to commit that act, you'll probably obtain an illegal firearm. So I just wanted to get your opinion on if regulations really make a difference in situations like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been so many. Well, first of all, he did buy his guns legally. So this idea that, hey, let's get universal background checks. He already passed a background check. So that's, more background checks isn't going to make a difference. Now, one of the things that the left is pushing is, well, we need to up the age. Well, first of all, whoa. 18-year-old is when our society considers that somebody becomes an adult. They can vote. They can fight for our country. So why are we going to treat them like a second-class citizen? Even if you were to ban 18 to 20-year-olds from being able to purchase firearms, you think that would keep the determined, evil, bad guy in that age category from getting their hands on a gun? The Sandy Hook shooter, it was very questionable whether he would have been able to pass a background check. So what did he do? He killed his first victim, his mother, and stole her firearms and used that to shoot up the Sandy Hook school. That same month, there was a Clackamas mall shooter in Oregon. He stole the AR-15 that he used. And the list goes on and on and on. There's an Oregon high school shooter stole his gun from a safe in Darby, Pennsylvania, at a hospital. The guy who shot up that hospital was a prohibited person. In other words, he had a criminal record, couldn't own guns, but he got guns anyway. And when he showed up, thankfully, it was a guy with a doctor with a concealed carry permit who shot and killed him. See, that's how you stop these things from happening. You know what's really remarkable? Here, we're only talking about this story in Texas. And when I say we, I mean our nation is. And yet, the very next day after the Texas shooting, there was an attempted mass shooting in West Virginia. And yet, that is not being talked about. And you want to guess why it's not being talked about? Because even though the guy showed up with an AR-15 to kill 30 people, a woman with a concealed carry permit at the birthday party, it was a birthday/graduation party, a woman with a concealed carry permit shot back, fatally wounded him, and that ended the threat. That is how you stop these things from happening. It's the potential victims who have to be able to shoot back. We can't, God bless the police for what they do, but there's always human error, and now we're finding out horrific reports from Texas, 19 officers there in the hallway, and they just waited for almost an hour before going into the room.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Those poor kids just waiting and waiting and waiting. You can't give your right of self-protection over to somebody else.
Yes.
And that's why teachers and staff members in the schools need to be armed, and 81% of police, by the way, support that, arming teachers and staff.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because one of the most horrific parts of the Texas school shooting story were the parents who were being stopped by police from rushing into the school to get their children. I wanted to ask you, why did the cops, the good guys with the guns, not protect these kids? And do you think that this kind of goes to show it's every man for himself, and it's more of a reason to have a gun to protect your children personally, since it seems that other adults aren't gonna step up and do that? I think one of the most interesting stories that I saw was one of the teachers that was in the school. She texted her husband, who was having a haircut, and he grabbed the barber's gun and came running to save like 20 kids. So do you think that this gives citizens, more reason to always be having their guns with them because the police don't seem to care?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they don't care, but it's very tragic and heartbreaking to hear these stories. And it is, I find it significant that, again, 81% of police do support teachers, arming teachers and staff. And I think to a large degree, there's the realization on their part they can't be everywhere immediately, right where you want them to be. I live in Fairfax County. I've been told from firefighters that if one cop shows up at your home and they're there on a 911 call and there's some type of emergency, they may get there real quick, but they are under orders to wait for backup. So even though they may get there quickly, they're still just going to wait there. So, yeah, I mean, a lot can happen in 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes. And oh my goodness, in that Texas school, I mean, it just went on and on and on for almost an hour where they were just waiting inside that classroom. They're, on the positive side.
Well, I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on that, though?
Well, I think this is what I was about to say. Teachers do need to be armed. And on the positive side, there have been teachers who have used their guns to stop school shootings. Joel Myrick of Pearl, Mississippi. There was a shooting at the high school, and the shooter was then leaving and going to shoot up a middle school. Joel Myrick, the assistant principal, grabbed his firearm and stopped the guy and held him for police. You've got states like Utah where for more than a couple of decades they've allowed, by the way, there's 20 states that to some form or another allow teachers to be armed. Utah is one of those. They're one of the most, the ones that have done this the longest. There's never been a mass shooting attempt. In fact, there's never been a mass shooting at a school during school hours where there are armed teachers and staff. It hasn't happened. It is a deterrent. That's like the story that nobody talks about. But that school in Texas, sadly, it was a gun-free zone. And 94% of mass shootings occur in places where the potential victims cannot be armed. And that school was one of them. Why do bad guys at a rate of 94% choose gun-free zones? Because they don't like bullets flying back at them. That's why they don't shoot up police stations or gun shows. No, they go to places where they're going to be, they're going to be the king, right? They want to be in control, and they don't want bullets shooting back at them. I mean, apparently this guy had grievances at the high school, but what a coward. He shows up at an elementary school because he wants the least resistance possible, and so he chooses a gun-free zone. That's what we have to stop in this country. This is something I'm really passionate about. Our president, our congressmen, our Supreme Court justices, they are all protected by security, by people with guns, right? I mean, do we get that? The important people in this country are protected with guns. Why aren't our children considered important? Why are the Democrats trying to get rid of school resource officers who are armed? They've been trying to do that over the last 2 years. This is where wokeism is getting people killed because, we can't have police in school. That's a bad look, okay? Well, now you've just thrown out the red carpet for these jerks, these animals to come in and shoot up your school.
Okay, but to that point, there were cops there and they didn't do anything. So how do you respond to people who say, well, even if we do have some good guys with guns, a lot of good that does us?
Well, one of the early reports was that there was a school resource officer that shot at him. It turns out that was incorrect. Now we're hearing that there was an officer in his cruiser that actually drove between the bad guy and the school, but I guess he didn't recognize that this was a dangerous target, and so he drove on. My answer to that is that there's going to be human error, and that's why we cannot rely. Since the founding of our country, we've never ultimately had to rely on military and police for our ultimate safety.
Yeah.
That is why the Second Amendment. That is why the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I mean, we see this in the Ukraine. The left just weeks ago was praising the Ukraine for issuing automatic guns to their civilians, even 18-year-olds. Now, all of a sudden, they've done a complete 180. Of course, they were never really with us on the Second Amendment, the left, but they've done a complete 180, and now they're arguing nobody should have these types of guns, or even the semi-automatic version of an AR-15. Wow, that's quite a turnabout. I mean, here we were praising why we would need a Second Amendment. Yeah, the Ukraine is defending themselves and arming the citizens to fight off the Russians. And now all of a sudden we're saying, oh, no, that's too dangerous. People shouldn't be able to have those guns. What a crock. See, this is the problem. When you just rely on somebody else for your safety, these types of things are going to happen invariably.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I just keep coming back to it. Teachers, principals, assistant principals like Joe Myrick in Mississippi, staff, those who are willing, I don't want to force anybody, but those who are willing to be armed need to be armed.
Yeah. I think it shows that our elites see, a war zone very different than America's inner cities, which, to be honest, often feel like a war zone. I appreciate you coming on and talking about this very complex, heartbreaking issue, Erich. Thank you so much for your expertise.
You're very welcome. Again, pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.